Brilliance of Infidel. Why Ayaan Hirsi Ali's memoir stands out as one of the most important works of our time. Let me start by asking you a question that's going to make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you read a book that fundamentally challenged everything you thought you knew about freedom, about courage, about what it actually costs to think for yourself? And I'm talking about real costs, not the kind where you lose a few Twitter followers and get uninvited to dinner parties. I'm talking about the kind where speaking your truth could literally get you killed. That's the world Ayaan Hirsi Ali, in her memoir, Infidel, isn't just a book, it's a manifesto, individual sovereignty wrapped up in one of the most extraordinary life stories you'll ever encounter. Over the next hour, I'm going to break down why this book matters, why critics both praise and attack it, and why in our current moment of cultural division and identity politics, Ayaan's story is more relevant than ever. We're going to look at the data, examine critical reception, explore the controversy, and understand why this woman's journey from Somali refugee to Dutch parliamentarian represents something fundamental about human potential and the power of ideas. So buckle up, it's going to challenge you. The woman behind the words. Who is Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Before we dive into the brilliance of the book itself, you need to understand the person who wrote it, because context matters. Credentials matter. And Ayaan's credentials aren't the kind you get from an Ivy League seminar on oppression theory. She earns hers the hard way. Born in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1969, Ayaan Hirsi Ali's early life reads like something out of a geopolitical thriller. Her father was a political dissident, a freedom fighter opposing a Somali dictator. This wasn't abstract activism. This was real danger. The kind where your family flees overnight because staying means imprisonment or death. Here's what's crucial to understand. Ayaan didn't grow up in one place. She experienced multiple cultures, multiple Islamic interpretations, multiple systems of government. Somalia, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Kenya. Each move taught her something different about power, about faith, about what it means to be a woman in a traditional Islamic society. At age 5, her grandmother arranged for her genital mutilation. Let that sink in for a moment. 5 years old, this wasn't some abstract cultural practice she heard about. She lived it. Her body bears the scars of it. Her mother was devout, traditional, often harsh. Her father, though largely absent, was intellectual, respected, and complicated. These weren't one-dimensional figures. They were human beings navigating impossible circumstances with the tools they had at hand. What makes Ayaan's story extraordinary isn't just survival. Lots of people survive. It's transformational. In Kenya, attending both British and Muslim schools, Ayaan began encountering Western ideas. She read, she questioned. She noticed inconsistencies between what she was taught and what she observed, between the equality Islam preached and brutality she witnessed, especially towards women. He embraced fundamentalist Islam for a period, wearing a full hijab, even a burqa, practicing submission. This detail is important because critics often portray her as someone who never understood Islam in the first place. It's categorically false. She understood it intimately. She practiced it devoutly. And that's what gives her criticism weight. Then came the turning point. Forced into an arranged marriage in 1992, traveling through Germany to join her would-be husband in Canada, she made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire life. She fled. She sought asylum in the Netherlands. She chose her own path. Think about that courage. 23 years old, no money, no connections, no family, speaking limited Dutch, lying about her background to secure asylum because the truth was too complicated or too dangerous. She risked everything for the possibility of freedom. The book itself, let's talk about the structure and the substance. What makes Infidel brilliant? Let's talk about craft, because brilliant ideas poorly expressed are just noise. Ayaan didn't just survive remarkable circumstances, she learned to articulate them with devastating clarity. Published in 2006 in Dutch and then in 2007 in English, Infidel is structured as a classic coming-of-age narrative, the stakes most of us can't imagine. Prose is direct, unsentimental, occasionally brutal. Ayaan doesn't ask for pity, She doesn't perform victimhood. She simply tells you what happened and lets the facts speak for themselves. Christopher Hitchens, one of the most rigorous literary critics of our time, called it a remarkable book. Anne Applebaum, Pulitzer Prize winner, said Infidel is a unique book with a unique writer. The New York Times described it as brave, inspiring, and beautifully written. These aren't participation trophies. These are assessments from people who read everything, who have no reason to praise mediocrity. What makes the writing work is specificity. Ayaan doesn't traffic in abstraction. She gives you scenes, dialogue, sensory details like the smell of frankincense, the sound of her mother's voice reciting her ancestry, the weight of the hijab in the Nairobi heat, the cold efficiency of the Dutch bureaucracy. She takes you inside multiple worlds, the chaos of the civil war in Somalia, the rigid religious schools of Saudi Arabia, the relative freedom of Kenya. Each location is rendered with precision, never judgment. The intellectual journey. And here's where the book transcends memoir into something more significant. It's a philosophical autobiography in the tradition of John Stuart Mill's. Ayaan doesn't just tell you what happened to her body, she shows you what happened to her mind. We watch her encounter Western political philosophy. We see her study at Leiden University, reading European history, engaging with Enlightenment thinkers. We observe her wrestling with cognitive dissonance. How could the Netherlands, this small country that barely existed on her mental map, provide such dramatically better lives than the Muslim countries she experienced? She asks uncomfortable questions. Why do Muslim-majority nations struggle with innovation? Why are women treated as perpetual children requiring male guardianship? These aren't rhetorical questions designed to score points. They're genuine intellectual puzzles she's trying to solve. And here's what makes her approach brilliant. She doesn't blame individuals. She examines systems. She looks at incentive structures, at cultural narratives, at how ideas shape behavior, which shape societies, which ultimately shape history. She reads the Quran critically, not just as a young believer absorbing dogma, but as an adult evaluating claims against evidence. She notices contradictions. She sees how interpretations shift based on who holds power. She recognizes that treating the 7th century tribal law as eternal divine revelation creates predictable challenges in modernity. The three central arguments. Argument 1, multiculturalism enables oppression. Ayaan argues forcefully that Western multiculturalism, the idea we should tolerate all cultural practices in the name of diversity, often translates into tolerating oppression. When Dutch officials looked the other way at forced marriages, honor violence, female genital mutilation, because it's their culture, they weren't being progressive, they were abandoning women and girls to abuse. She witnesses this firsthand as an interpreter in a refugee center, later as a politician. Women being beaten, girls being married off to strangers, all happening in Europe while authorities practice cultural relativism rather than enforcing universal human rights. Her solution? Integration over multiculturalism. Shared values, Enlightenment principles, applied universally. The radical notion that women's rights aren't culturally relative, they're human rights. Her second argument. This is where she becomes controversial. Ayaan didn't argue that Muslims are bad people. She argues that Islamic doctrine, as literally interpreted, contains ideas incompatible with liberal democracy, gender equality, and free inquiry. The evidence she presents is personal, but also textual. She examines Quranic verses about women's testimony being worth half that of men, about wives being fields for husbands to plow, about apostates deserving death, about unbelievers being less than fully human. She isn't cherry-picking. These are mainstream interpretations held by millions. Crime, in the eyes of her critics, was saying these things out loud in public with specificity. Paul wasn't for destruction, but reformation. She wanted Islam to undergo a kind of transformation Christianity has experienced, moving from literal interpretations to metaphorical reading, from theocracy to separation of church and state, from revealed truth to one among many. The third argument: individual liberty requires individual responsibility. Perhaps her most American argument: freedom isn't just about rights, it's about agency. It requires taking responsibility for your own thinking, your own choices, your own life. This terrified people on both sides. Religious fundamentalists hated it because it threatened hierarchical authority. Progressive multiculturalists hated it because it contradicts their narrative of Muslims as passive victims requiring perpetual protection. Ayaan rejected victimhood. She said, "I came from this system. It damaged me. I choose to leave. I choose to think differently. You can too." Radical individual agency remains deeply threatening to anyone invested in group identity politics. What the serious thinkers saw in this book. Christopher Hitchens, before his death, called Ayaan Hirsi Ali the most important public intellectual probably ever to come out of Africa. He reviewed Infidel extensively and identified three cultural themes in her work: personal emancipation from tribalism and superstition, parliamentary work exposing Islamic violence in Europe, and the dismissal silence from feminists and multiculturalists about the violence. Hitchens got it. He understood that Ayaan represents something rare: genuine liberalism confronting genuinely illiberal practices, even when those practices come from marginalized communities. Anne Applebaum praised the book and its uniqueness in the Washington Post. She recognized that Western audiences rarely encounter insider perspectives on Islamic societies written this way, or at this level of intellectual rigor and personal honesty. Time magazine named Ayaan one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2005. That wasn't because she was famous, it was because she was important. There's a difference. The book sold out in its initial Dutch print in 2 days. The English edition became an international bestseller. Readers, recognizing authenticity, even responded to courage. They appreciated someone willing to speak uncomfortable truths regardless of the consequences. Criticism and where it comes from. Brilliance always attracts oppositions, and Ayaan's critics come from multiple directions. From the left, Orientalism and Islamophobia. Progressive academics accused her of perpetuating gendered Orientalism, the idea that she was reinforcing Western narratives about Muslim women needing rescue, thereby justifying Western imperialism. Anthropologist Lily Abu argued that Infidel fits the post-9/11 genre of literature used to vindicate the war on terror through a moral crusade to save women. One critic wrote that Ayaan created a monolithic good West against a bad Muslim country, while ignoring colonialism, slavery, and systemic exploitation by European powers. Here's the challenge with this criticism. It's more interested in theoretical consistency than actual women's lives. Yes, colonialism happened. Yes, Western nations have blood on their hands. None of that makes forced marriage acceptable. None of that makes female genital mutilation okay. None of that means we should criticize patriarchal practices whenever they occur. Ayaan's response essentially was, you can acknowledge Western failures while still recognizing that liberal democracy and individual rights produce better outcomes than theocracy and tribal law. This shouldn't be controversial. And it reveals more about the academic politics than about Ayaan's arguments. From Islamic communities, apostasy and betrayal. Muslim critics call her an apostate, a traitor, a tool of Western imperialism. Death threats followed. There is an Islamic kill order known as a fatwa, and these were issued on her life after she collaborated with filmmaker Theo van Gogh on Submission, a short film criticizing Islam's treatment of women. Van Gogh was murdered in Amsterdam. The killer knifed a letter to Van Gogh's body that included death threats against Ayaan. She went into hiding, was living under protection ever since. Multiple fatwas, constant security, moving locations, living as a target. Think about what this means. She wrote a memoir. She expressed ideas. The response from some quarters was, "You deserve to die." That response, more than any argument she made, proves the point about the need for reformation, from conservatives weaponizing her story. Then there was the uncomfortable truth that some on the political right embraced Ayaan not because they cared about women's rights or liberty, but because her story could be weaponized against immigration and Muslims in general. She joined the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. Critics pounced. See, she's just a tool for the right-wing Islamophobia. But here's what's interesting. Ayaan has been consistent. She criticizes all religious fundamentalism. She opposes authoritarianism from any source. She supports women's rights regardless of who agrees with her or not. The fact that principled positions produce strange bedfellows says more about our polarized discourse than about her integrity. The controversy. Did she lie? In 2006, the Dutch television program revealed that Ayaan had lied about her asylum application, about her name and refugee status. She admitted it. She resigned from parliament, and a political crisis ensued. Critics use this to discredit everything. If she lied about asylum, why should we believe anything she says? Let's be serious for a moment. A woman fled forced marriage with no resources, no connections, no family, facing bureaucratic systems designed to be difficult. She simplified her story to increase her chances of survival. This is shocking to whom exactly? Dutch asylum system, like most Western immigration systems, is Byzantine and often unjust. People lie to navigate it because telling a complex truth gets you rejected. It's not a moral failing. That's irrational behavior under irrational circumstances. What matters is, did she lie an infidel? No, the book is transparent about her asylum application. She owns what she did and why. And that's called honesty. Why this book matters now. The stakes, identity politics versus individual agency. Here's why Infidel remains essential reading in 2025. We live in an era obsessed with identity. Group identity, racial identity, religious identity, gender identity. The message from both progressive left and traditionalist right is your group membership defines you. Ayaan's life story demolishes that narrative. She was born into a specific identity, Somali Muslim woman, daughter of clan elder. Every incentive structure pushed her to stay within those boundaries. Her entire community reinforced conformity. She chose otherwise, not easily, not without costs, but she chose. That choice to think for herself, to elevate the truth against evidence, prioritize individual conscience over group loyalty, represents the core promise of Enlightenment liberalism. It terrifies collectivists of all stripes. The data. What actually works? Let's look at some numbers, because I deal in data, not feelings. According to the Human Development Index, the top-ranked countries for quality of life, women's rights, economic opportunity, and individual freedom are overwhelmingly Western democracies with Enlightenment values. Norway, Switzerland, Ireland, Hong Kong, Iceland, Germany, Sweden, Australia, Netherlands, and Denmark. Muslim-majority nations cluster at the bottom, not because of anything essential about Muslim people, humans are humans, but because institutional structures, legal frameworks, and cultural norms derive from literal interpretations of religious law. The World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report consistently shows the worst outcome for women in countries where Islamic law shapes policy: Yemen, Iraq, Pakistan, Chad, and Iran. This isn't Islamophobia, it's measurement. Ayaan looked at the data. Most academics acknowledged it. She asked why. What's the causal mechanism? And she offered answers rooted in ideas, institutions, and incentives. With intellectual honesty, the fact that it makes people uncomfortable doesn't make it wrong. The courage gap. Here's what I find most remarkable about Ayaan. She could have just stayed quiet. After fleeing the Netherlands, she could have just lived quietly, gratefully, for safety, keeping her head down. Instead, she learned Dutch, got educated, entered politics, spoke publicly, made films, and wrote books. Why? Because she recognized that her escape meant nothing if others remained trapped. Because she understood that changing systems required changing ideas. Because she valued truth and freedom more than comfort and safety. It's moral courage at the highest level. Compare that to performative activism we see constantly. People claiming victimhood from positions of extraordinary privilege, demanding trigger warnings in safe spaces, insisting that words are violence. Ayaan knows what actual violence looks like. She lived it. She survived it. She chose to speak anyway. The Reformation question. The central question Infidel poses remains unanswered. Can Islam reform? Christianity did. Judaism did. They moved from literal interpretations to contextual readings, from theocratic authority to individual conscience, from viewing Scripture as perfect and unchanging to understanding it as human documents reflecting their historical moments. That transformation wasn't easy. It took centuries. It required brave individuals willing to challenge authority and face consequences. Ayaan argues Islam needs a similar reformation. Not destruction, reformation. Recognition that 7th century tribal law shouldn't govern 21st century pluralistic societies. That women are fully human with equal rights. That apostasy isn't a capital crime. That free inquiry strengthens rather than threatens faith. This should be uncontroversial. That it remains explosive tells you everything about the forces arrayed against it. Part 5. The Writing Lessons. What makes Infidel work as literature? Because technique matters. Ayaan doesn't tell you life is hard. She shows you. The sounds of her grandmother's cane striking the floor, the precise Quranic verses she memorized, the exact words her mother used when beating her, the temperature of the Dutch winter when first arrived. The specificity creates authenticity. You believe her because the details are too strange, too specific, too unpolished to be fabricated. Structure in the pacing. The book moves chronologically, but with a clear narrative. Innocence, indoctrination, questioning, escape, transformation, confrontation. Each section builds tension. Each chapter raises the stakes. She doesn't bog down in tangents. Every scene serves the larger story. Every anecdote illustrates a character or theme. Emotional restraint. Perhaps most importantly, Ayaan doesn't manipulate emotions. She doesn't cry for sympathy. You'll tell from my writings and my videos, I'm not a particularly emotional man. I cried in public while reading this book. She moved me that much. Her intellectual honesty is something to be emulated. Now it is difficult to be as brave as she is. She lives her life as a shining light, bravery. I admire her courage. So why is Infidel brilliant? Because it tells an extraordinary story with literary skill. Because it asks fundamental questions about freedom, faith, and human potential. Because it challenges comfortable assumptions from all political directions. Because it demonstrates that ideas have consequences and that choosing your own path requires courage most of us can't imagine. Ayaan Hirsi Ali wrote a book that makes progressives uncomfortable because it criticizes non-Western cultures. That makes conservatives uncomfortable because it demands women's full equality. I think it's heroic what Ayaan Hirsi Ali has done. I think this book is worth your time. Thanks for listening.